All right, well, I think it's going, so...
Hey guys.
Hey guys, it's Seibo and Brandon,
What's
back
up?
for, I guess, episode number 3 now of our yet-to-be-named podcast. I like to call it Happy Asian Males because, well, most of the commentary that comes out of Asian men, whether it's Angry Asian Man or a lot of these other things, always seem to be like, we're complaining about something that's not fair.
The white and black guys are taking our women.
Which there is...
I don't know if that's real.
Yeah. I was going to say there's some truth to that, but I was going to say that there is some truth to why Asian men are angry, but, I like to think that, there's also a large contingency of us that are super happy, super satisfied, that see some things that could be improved on as well, and...
oh, dude, I totally agree with that sentiment. I didn't always think that way in the past years, but in the recent years, I've been much more grateful. And when we were setting up, we were talking about what did you say, privilege? This is just a paraphrase. We don't quite know where it's from, right?
Right.
But privilege is only privilege if you don't include gratitude. So if you don't honor the things that were coming before you to get you to this point, then it's like, okay, why you don't get to show off or be upset about things.
And I think a lot of that phrase had to do with people starting to put a negative spin on the word privileged, because, my whole goal in life is to give my kids a privileged life, but it's not to make them spoiled. I just want to make sure that they have all the resources required, so whatever dream that they have, they'll be able to work hard towards it and hopefully one day realize it. But, I think the word privilege has taken such a negative connotation now where if you are from a middle class or upper middle class family, you're almost embarrassed to use those words because you don't want to be lumped in to a certain category of people that may not show a lot of empathy towards others that don't have as much as them. But the truth of the matter is, it's like everything else. If you have a lot of money or if you don't, what matters is how you treat other people and what you're actually doing with it, not whether you have it or not.
There's a really good book from the School of Life series. For those of you who know Elaine de Botton. So the book is How to Think About Money, and it distinguishes two types of possibilities for people. The people who have high values, and then people who have resources, right? Like people who have resources have status symbols like, Lexus and Maseratis, but the people who have values are kind of like the beatniks in Berkeley, right? Like we care about the environment, but we have zero resources. Our parents kicked us out because we, and the marrying of the two, of just looking at money as simply a resource and then combining that as a way to express your values. Because a lot of times those two things are kind of compared, like, oh, I know I definitely did that. I was like, if I'm going to be the philosopher, save the world kind of guy, I have to deny all of those things about money. Money's evil. Money's the root. Or on the other side, I'm like, well, my family's Chinese. I'm second generation immigrant. And they worked fucking hard to get me the ability to go to school. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they gave me that privilege to say I have values. I have the ability to think. So if I didn't acknowledge that, I would not be here. Or I would just look like an asshole. So I stopped looking like an asshole when I was grateful for it.
Yeah, and I think that just, all of this goes into just kind of like, I don't really have a name for it, but just more, analytical and cognitive thinking for yourself. A lot of times, myself growing up is, I didn't want to help people. So when I saw other people that wanted to help people and, their battle cry was big corporations are shit. Then my battle cry became big corporations are shit.
Yeah.
Whether or not I knew what the big corporations were doing or not doing, know, and I think a lot of people, they just tend to hear these things, especially if it's someone that they look up to, and start repeating them without really understanding, what it means to them. And ultimately, what's interesting is, I'm around a lot of these people that want to help people, but they also, have these desires to be financially stable. And I kind of see that internal conflict within themselves that they're struggling. Like, well, I've been saying this whole time I want to help people, but now I want to make money. Does that make me all of a sudden a different person or a bad person? And of course the answer is no. You're just figuring out we need money to survive. and to be happy. You know, not that it helps, not that it makes you happy, but it definitely takes away a lot of like the stresses and concerns that people have when, you know, they're trying to figure out if they can make this much rent, or if their kids are going to be able to buy, you know, the latest shoes, or whatever the case may be. You know, money definitely helps with that area.
There's that sweet spot. I forget where this is said, but like they said, like 70K is about that sweet spot where you're not struggling for money, but anything kind of beyond that, it doesn't really add to the like the level of happiness that is possible.
Right.
Like,
right.
Because I remember, you know, for many years in my late 20s, I made less than $20,000 a year, and it scared the living shit out of me when I was at the end of the year. I was like, how the fuck did I get through this year?
Yeah, how did you do that? I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good with living on a budget, but, you know, that seems...
I drove a 1996 Toyota Camry for so long, and it was like, you know, the funny thing is, though, like, I had resources, like, I had family who could have pulled me out, but I was so hell-bent on doing it all myself, because there was this kind of, like, I need to do all of this. I need to scrape it together and be that kind of, like, bootstrapper. But it's such a myth, because, like, people don't cite a lot of the times when they do, excel or have success, where their heritage comes from.
Yeah.
You know, and part of what my struggle was is accepting parts of Asian culture that helped assist me, and also the ones that repressed the shit out of Brandon.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
it is, as obviously another Asian man, I grew up with all of these same types of positives and negatives, and a lot of it did really kind of just add complexity into something that was already complex to think about. You know, like, how much money do I need?
Yeah,
you know, what's a good amount?
Crazy.
If I want to live in, you know, the Bay Area, you know, we have to significantly earn more than other parts of the country. Is it worth living here? You know, and those are all questions that I had to ask myself. And then ultimately I was like, well, if I move someplace different, you know, I'll not have this enclave of just a wide, diverse set of people to interact with as well. So all those things are kind of going through my mind when I was growing up and trying to figure out, you know, what I should do for a living, you know, in order to sustain this. So it's been a very interesting journey for myself.
So the kind of reason that we got jump-started on today's episode was things about repression. And I don't know if you guys know this. I just recently discovered that Seibo can move. Like, he told me he breakdanced, but like I saw a video compilation of him doing some crazy shit with his body. I was like, fuck yeah, he's like a monk warrior dude, fucking flipping through the air, doing kicks and shit, and like, you know, just being a warrior badass. And like, I think there's that part of us that just like Bruce Lee kind of just called us. We're like, man, everybody got that warrior heart in them, you know?
Yeah.
And we all express that or repress that in different ways.
Exactly. I think, you know, when I was growing up, I just tried to do too much in a small amount of time, you know.
That's called being young.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to be the strongest, the fastest, the smartest. And I think as I grew older, you know, I mean, there's a part of me that, well, I knew that there was a strong emphasis on the physicality side because, you know, I would just see, you know, certain athletes get treated better because they were good at certain sports. So for me, I was like, well, I'm smaller, but if there's like weight specific stuff or there's anything that requires like dexterity and agility, those would be areas that I would get strong in. And ultimately for me, you know, I worked on that first, the physical side, and then later in my late 20s and early 30s, I really started working on more of like the mental side and what it took to, I mean, I knew I was always, you know, fairly intelligent, you know, I knew I wasn't stupid at least. I just didn't know like how to take advantage of what I had because, well, what I really wanted was, you know, to be like, you know, to be like Michael J. Fox in Back in the Future.
Oh,
you know,
God,
I wanted
Marty,
to be like the main guy that
McFly.
everyone went to. And ultimately, when I was younger, being the smartest guy in class that wasn't the checkbox to check off. You know,
Fuck no, it was better to be almost dumber and repress that.
I think so
in certain
too.
parts of school because you get ostracized if you're the person who's at the front of the class actually integrating information from a teacher.
Exactly.
They'd be like, this motherfucking nerd. I don't know if you did that, but I definitely repressed that in high school.
Yeah, I don't know how consciously I played it down, but I did know that, you know, if I was the 4.0 student, I would just be playing into the stereotype.
Right.
And if anything, I think my MO was, what is the stereotype today? And just do everything the opposite of that.
Yes, contrarianism is like such a kind of like B-rated answer to like authenticity. You know what I mean? Like for people who are actually being authentic, it's scary because there's not a lot of comparison. That means you're unique. You know?
Yes.
It was funny. I was watching Conan the Barbarian yesterday, and if you have ever seen Conan, the very first scene, of his development is he's just pushing this wheel, right? He physically develops himself. He doesn't really have much smarts or whatever, and then after he gets buff, you know, into Arnold buffness, they throw him into a pit to fight, and after he proves himself after being a really good fighter, they show him culture and language and also sexuality. And they basically groom him to be this champion dude.
Oh, wow.
And I'd never noticed this before.
I didn't remember the culture part where they were trying to unbarbarianize him. Huh?
They had scrolls and he was learning language, and then this girl walks in, he completely stops everything. And he's just like, all right, it's on. And then I realized, like...
Pumping and humping.
We come back to that. But anyway, the reason I'm saying this is because what I did was I went very out of order. I repressed my physicality. And I just focused purely because I knew I would fail in some sense, so I didn't even try it at all. Like, I wanted to be a breakdancer, which is why it's really cool to have met you at this point in my life, because it's not too, anyway. But I just focused on being like the mental alpha, and that's why I went into philosophy.
Interesting.
Because I was like, if I can't outfight them, I'm gonna outthink them. And this goes back to like when I was maybe 7 years old. I had... My mom had said that I had the reading ability of like a middle or high schooler.
Oh, wow.
And my teachers noticed that, and then, so when they said that, automatically that was like this expectation. And all his teachers would write that on my reports, like, your son's not living up to his potential. I was like, I started to get wind of that, and I was like, you know what, fuck you guys. I am going to do everything opposite of what you want me to do.
Yeah. It's so weird that people feel the need to... kind of be a contrarian, you know? And, you know, I think Gordon wrote like a really interesting post yesterday, which was basically like, what do we do to lie to ourselves? And how do we continue lying to ourselves when we live these lives that we know aren't extremely satisfying, but we keep doing it? And, you know, I think that seems to be a pervasive theme on this show, which is the Asian male that is trying to portray a certain image of himself, thinking that it's going to get him something better, when in actuality, it just continues that lifelong lie that he's been telling himself. And, you know, I think the later you figure it out, the bigger of a hole you have to dig yourself out of, right?
So I guess the question we could pose ourselves today is like, what lie have we been unraveling or like kind of living that we became conscious of?
Well, I think a good place to start is, you know, the text messages we traded today, which was you were writing an essay.
Yes.
So you want to tell everybody why you were writing that essay and what piqued my curiosity?
Oh, so I'm writing an essay to get into erotic film school, which is being taught. It's a 3-day crash course taught by Madison Young, who is a feminist pornographer. And my friend took me to an erotic short film festival in Oakland, of course. And I walked in and I was like, wow, I'd never been in a sex positive environment. And I started to feel all of these inexplicable things.
And when you say sex positive, what do you mean by sex positive?
The sex positive just means you accept sexuality as a part of your character, not just at least how I think of it. I don't quite know. I think it's when the discussion of sex is had. It's not even like repressed.
Got it. So it's normalized.
It's normalized.
Yes.
So when I was talking about the essay, it's to what do I want to change? And I thought that it was like, I want to do an erotic film, and then it kind of stumped me. I was like, I don't know why. I think it's not cool. And I was like, wait, there's no cool Asian dudes who are portrayed as sex icons.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, Jet Li doesn't get to kiss Aaliyah. Apparently, it was the original ending intended for it, but they do like a fucking middle school hug.
Yeah.
And Jackie Chan gets portrayed as like this monkey. You know, the dancing monkey guy. He's fun, he's cute, but he's never like the hot dude.
Right.
And I was like,
right,
well,
that's for Tom Cruise or Matt Damon to come in and
what the fuck? I'm just gonna say that. What the fuck? Matt Damon in the wall? What the... Anyway, we won't go on that one, but... yeah, so that's... I want to help change that perception that... But I was like, well, how has our culture repressed it? Maybe it's not culture saying, you can't be sexy, Asian guys. It's like, maybe we're just not letting that out. Maybe we're lying about that.
Yeah, and you know what's even interesting is... So, Brandon and I were texting about this subject matter before filming today, and I told him that there's actually a student at UC Berkeley, either a law student or in their MBA program, I'm pretty sure it's law, that does porn.
That's so awesome.
And Brandon's immediate response was like, yeah, we should get her and Asa Akira to do this film. And I was like, no, it's a guy.
I know. That was the kicker. I was like,
yeah.
I didn't know how to respond.
Yeah, so that even just shows like how ingrained it is in our mind that, you know, that the lead or this Asian porno star, you know, whose sex I didn't disclose, we just automatically thought it was a woman, you know, and whether it's the small penis myth or just...
I have a small penis, by the way.
Yeah.
Just gonna clear that up.
Or any other, you know, particular reason why, you know, we just don't think of, you know, Asian males when we think of, you know, like people that we would want to date.
But
right?
Here's the fucking craziest shit. Taoist teachings are largely sexual.
Are they?
Yeah, they have this huge volume of knowledge that is how the spiritual and the sexual enhance and those things come out into like their philosophy.
Interesting.
The practices. There's a guy, he wrote a book called The Multi-Orgasmic Man, Montauk Chia, and he talks about Taoist principles.
Okay.
You know, like presence and mindfulness, and it's just, but applied to sexuality, that's a weird concept because Westerners don't think of it that way. But that was integral to Taoist thinking. And I was like doing my homework and I was like, holy shit, I'm going down this rabbit hole. And I think about like how when people came over in the gold rush, like Chinese men, to like make their fortune or whatever, and we lost a lot of that connection with the women. We didn't have anyone to practice these things with.
Right.
We were like the persons who did like the shitty jobs and you just did them because that's what we had. But you don't have a partner to like practice and be, you know, sexual with.
Yeah, but didn't the rest of the immigrants kind of come in like male-dominated waves too, like the Irish and Italians? So, you know, is there a reason why they had less of this than repression than Asian males? Because
I don't know, actually. I don't think I've ever talked to them like any like strictly Italian or Irish or, you know, Scottish people or even Russian people like about what is their culture's view on sexuality.
Yeah, because I do know, I mean, you're right, you know, like the Asian immigrants that came to America first, they were essentially working entry-level jobs, so that in itself is not sexy. They're probably working like the, you know, even amongst entry-level jobs, like for example, when they were making the railroads, I don't know if you guys know, but you know, the people that were laying the explosives for that were the Asian men, and many of them ended up laying the explosives and dying. You know, they basically get like the shittiest of the shit jobs. And you know, I don't know if you guys like eating chop suey, but the reason chop suey was invented, I don't know if you know this, was that basically these Asian men had to eat the scraps. So they would get like the last of everything, and then they would just combine all of it and make it into chop suey, and that was like the food that they got to eat. So not only were they poor, they got to eat the worst foods, they worked the worst jobs. I don't know if those are reasons that kind of added fuel to, you know, the Asian male feeling repressed in this society.
And you know, I think what all you said is very relevant because these like if you go and there's a documentary. Maybe you've seen it. In Search of General Tso's Chicken.
I have not, but I've heard you reference it, and
man.
I love General Tso's chicken, by the way. So.
It's awesome. It's not, the documentary's not actually about chicken. It's about Chinese entrepreneurship, which is ironic because you're an entrepreneur.
Right. I should have seen this.
Well, it's funny because you practice a lot of these things that we're talking about. Like the main thing was Chinese people developed an association in Chinatown to help cooks develop the skills so they could go to different random parts of the country and start restaurants with generic names like, Long Dragon or, something like that, but not stepping on each other's toes.
Exactly.
And that solidarity, I don't know if that happens. Maybe it happens in other ethnic cultures, but I was like, man, maybe I started to turn the arrow back to myself. I was like, shit, dude, I think I've denied a lot of what makes me Brandon, which is I'm Chinese.
Right.
I may be American nationality and citizen, but Chinese culture, because it wasn't cool to be Chinese. So I just blocked a lot of that off. And now I'm realizing, and through social media and also through live persons, they're like, dude, owning the Asian thing is sexy. I'm like, what? They're like, Brandon, you're sexy. I'm like, stop. That's not right. It just doesn't compute with my operating system.
Yeah, and that is kind of, I think, we had discussed this on the first one a little bit, but, I feel the same, and hopefully this next generation growing up, they don't have this same repression where just taking a compliment all of a sudden requires, a fundamental change in your thinking paradigm.
I know, right? You're just like...
Yeah. So, I can only speak for myself, but why do you think Asian men feel repressed? Now, now things are different. But why do you think they still feel repressed?
I think that because of the focus on security building, and by security building I mean like getting good internships and doing activities that are going to contribute to getting monetary gain and elevating in society, like going to Kumon or like playing sports or getting an internship, but for the security building. But the arts are not considered first. In development.
Absolutely.
Play violin only to get to the next level, not because you're expressing the feeling of music.
When my dad told me he wanted me to play golf, I was like, cool, he's starting to get into like sports and stuff, but it was merely a vehicle so that when I met other businessmen, I could play golf with them. It was not for enjoyment or anything.
Right.
It was just to serve a purpose, and it was really weird to think about like all of these. It's like you said, the piano or the violin, that is an instrument not to express individuality, but it's like a check mark or a checkbox for like the college application. Like, okay, does he do anything other than study? Oh, okay, he plays violin. All right, he's semi-well-rounded.
Oh, man, and when you say that, it's like, okay, let's just go back, and it's like, you've seen Asian people, they have children. They've reproduced.
A lot.
A lot.
We have 1.5 billion.
A lot. But no one talks about sex. Like, what do you do? And because I think that the thought of sex being pleasurable doesn't enter the picture. It's just, but there's a book called Sex at Dawn. And it's, have you heard of this?
Christopher Ryan, right?
Yeah. I'm just getting into it. It's the anthropological story of how humans were built to be hypersexual. That's his argument, at least. And, like, I'm not going to go into details, but the act of pleasure, like, that is something people seek and repress in so many ways, and we're not excluded from that group. Like, I myself would acknowledge it, but I wouldn't like make it the leading edge of my life.
That's very interesting. I think we're making some progress here because, I mean, when I asked you that question about what makes us so repressed, I'm going through my own head just trying to think of answers myself and not really coming up with much other than we're small and smart, so we have to have some sort of defense mechanism to survive. But, you know, I really do think, like, you know, pleasure is such a strong motivator, and our society very much, I think, promotes, like, delayed gratification, right?
Yes.
Like, you could have one lollipop now, or if you get an A, you could have 20 lollipops, you know? So there's, I mean, in my mind, that was kind of ingrained early on, which is, if you take pleasure now, you're going to miss out on a lot later.
Yes.
Except, I don't think ever taking pleasure now became part of like the equation.
It
you know?
never
was
came
always,
in.
Yeah, it was always pushing this pleasure off to some after you graduate college, or after you get your first job, or after you get your MBA. So it seemed very much like a goal-oriented way of raising people versus helping people understand that the journey,
the process oriented.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, if you've ever watched the Christopher Reeve Supermans, the villains get tossed to something called the Phantom Zone.
What's that?
It's just this triangle that is
yeah,
like another
it's kind of
dimension.
like purgatory,
it's
right?
purgatory, and all these things that don't get us to what the outcome is, which is supposedly happiness, right? Safety. And you push all of these things to the Phantom Zone, you end up with a very lopsided person who does weird shit on the side. So, back to our conversation about like Japan. Tell a little bit about what we were talking about Japan.
Yeah,
not to crack on Japanese.
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I love Japan. I was born in Japan. I have a Japanese first name, and it's actually one of the cultures that I'm most fascinated by. And part of that fascination is by how much white people love Japanese culture too. You know, I'm just like,
yes.
Why are Caucasians so like into this culture? And I got some hypothesis with like the cute little Japanese girls and stuff, but that's neither here nor there. What is important is that one of the most interesting things about, let's just take Tokyo, for example, metropolitan city. I can't remember how many people, but I think somewhere in the ballpark of like 13 million or
Jesus
whatever.
Christ,
It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong or in the ballpark. Just tons of people in the city. But if you ever go there, go on the subway, open doors for people. Like, everyone is super compliant. Everyone is aware of each other's physical surroundings, and if they see like an old lady and a child coming, they all get out of the way, let the old lady and the child go. It's just a very conscientious society.
They're polite, and a lot of people comment
Super
on that.
polite. I mean, it's like, I often get messages from my friends in America, like, if Americans behave this way, it would just solve all the problems in America. Well, the flip side is a society that is that buttoned up, that is that polite, that is that aware of everybody else, you know, they have some crazy baggage, you know, and we were saying, like, Japanese men, or I don't want to just say men, but Japanese men and women are like one of like the most sexually perverse cultures, you know, like they have a category called hentai, which is like octopus tentacles that somehow weave their way in and out of like
yes.
you know, sexual positions. And you know, my only conclusion is that the amount that you repress the people during the daytime is equal to the amount that they need to react when no one's watching, i.e., you know, the anime porn or things like that.
You know, there's a saying, Jedi in the streets, Sith in the sheets. Right? And so that, I know that sounds funny, but there's a lot of truth to that. Right? We acknowledge the Jedi, like the politeness and the da-da-da-da, the Napoleon Hill version of having a likable personality.
Right, right.
And then there's your fucking animal shit. That is, I think, this is my theory, at least, if the tentacle porn, I think they may view that as a monstrous thing inside of themselves, like a shadow thing, and that represents that part of them that they can't quite grasp.
Interesting.
Or as, like, for myself, like, if I look at what's my Sith, right, and I have to be very dominant in lots of parts of my life, which I wasn't before. And so that plays out in how one of my fantasies is to be a cabana boy and to just like be servant to somebody. I don't even know where it comes from, but to say that out loud, it feels already half okay because I don't question where it comes from. I just acknowledge it. Whereas before I would be like, that's not it. And you know, people's behaviors say it all, but they could say X, Y, and Z. Their words are somewhat trustworthy, but it's their behaviors.
Yeah.
I was like, how am I behaving, you know? And I don't know because I haven't explored those things because there's just no conversation about it.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
interesting. And not to jump around, but, you know, you said something earlier that was kind of interesting, which was like you tried to become like the alpha Asian as far as like kind of like mental, I don't want to say warfare, but on the mental side.
It, yeah.
And what's interesting is when you said that, you know, I started thinking about like, you know, did I do the same thing but not realize it? And as we've been speaking here, one of the things that popped into my mind was, although I wasn't scholastically like hitting home runs, more out of just, like I said, not necessarily wanting to be rebellious against my parents, but more of just like, I don't give a fuck what the Asian male's supposed to be like. I'm just going to do me. But what I did do in both middle school and high school was I befriended the toughest guy, the strongest guy, the most alpha athlete in school. And I don't want to say he was like under my control, but he was.
Master Blaster, like in Mad Max.
Like, I would walk around with him. Sometimes, I mean, it wasn't like he was at my beck and call, but if anyone fucked with me, they knew they would have to fuck with him. And I started thinking, I was like, oh shit, that was like my way, I think, of using the mental horsepower to give myself a lot of security, especially on the physical side, that allowed me to run my mouth the way I wanted to run my mouth without having
brilliant.
Any, physical recourse from it. But,
say it to my face. And then someone comes out bigger and you're like, that's hella funny, dude.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to go off topic there, but I just thought it was like an interesting thing because, I was curious how you used your kind of mental advantages as you were growing up, and how did those things play out?
I mean, that story is super relevant actually, because there's a scene in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee where he's on the boat going to the island in the beginning, and there's this guy, he's just walking around, he's a tough white guy, and he's just like challenging people, what's your style? And then Bruce is like, no style. And then he's like, I'll show you on the island. And the white guy just hops on this boat, he's like, let's go. And then Bruce Lee takes the boat and he lets the boat go on the smaller tugboat, and he just makes him his bitch, and he just lets the little kids have the rope so they can fuck with this guy. And there is something to be said about understanding who's the biggest and strongest and how to befriend them, right? How do you understand what their plight is, because they're often misunderstood. Like,
that's interesting.
I make friends with the biggest and strongest people on earth, like Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting. These guys are strong by objective measurements. They will crush people, but they don't. They're often the most gentle people, but they're so misunderstood. So I take time to understand them, because if you fuck with me, they're going to be standing near me. And there's a logic to that, because we are small and frail. We can get hurt. We are vulnerable in that way.
So I think it's, since we're being honest here and we're trying to have transparent discussion, I think it's an honest thing to say. Asians in general are smaller, less bone density is not as thick, so there has to be other ways to figure out how to survive in a world, right?
Well, I mean, we'll go to that point on how to survive in the world, but now they're like, going back to Olympic weightlifting, it's actually, the Chinese got highlighted because of their technical prowess. This is only of recent, development. I won't go into too much, but because we are smaller of stature, we don't gain muscle as fast. We had to develop a technique that was right for our bodies, that was a lot more efficient. That you couldn't just, you had to make every use of your horsepower. You didn't have any extra muscle mass.
So if like a Ukrainian or Eastern European
Russian, they're just
did
so
that,
strong.
Well, what if they use that same technique then? Would that work for them, or is there certain mechanics that make it work for the Asian body type, being shorter limbs, longer torso? I mean, does that factor into this lifting style that you're talking about?
I mean, there's a whole argument going on amongst the world about it, right? But the point, I guess, for us is that we finally found what worked for us, and we're just like, yeah, we also wanted to look pretty too. So people started to notice. They're like, wow, that little tiny 120-pound girl is snatching 250 pounds.
Right.
And the women started to change the perception too. But I mean, going back to what we're talking about, being Asian and frail, like, I knew because I hadn't addressed my own physicality, I had to be extra smart. But that pulled me out of one of the best things about my body, is that's where you feel pleasure. It's not a mental concept. And so, like, I was very repressed. Like, my girlfriends would comment that, like, I was a robot. When people would die, I'm like, these things happen. That's called rationalizing death, right?
Right.
But if I really got down to it, I'm like, shit, I'm scared to cry because that means I have to face my own mortality.
Yeah. What's interesting is, like, you were talking about, like, these Olympic lifters and these strong men and how they could basically crush you like a grape if they wanted to, but they're these really nice, kind of gentle giants, right? And, you know, I think a lot of people that meet mixed martial artists or UFC fighters, like, they're always surprised at how mellow and easy to hang out with these guys are. And part of me has to believe that if we kind of go back to what we were talking about, how much of ourselves we repress as young Asian boys, and then finally at some point, you know, you and I at some point discovered, like, oh, it's okay to be Asian. And then from that point, once we started to relearn what it was like to be the Asian versions of ourselves, I think we're, like, super happy now, right?
Yes.
So is it that people just need to go through these phases and find themselves, and that's just part of the deal? Or do you think there's, like, you know, like the Tim Ferriss way of, like, finding some sort of hack to get rid of all this repression and move on with your life? Because most of the people that leave comments are, I think, Asian males in their early 20s. You know, the people that have left comments on our videos.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, they're hearing what we're saying, it's resonating with them, and they're probably at that same point where they're like, I want to fucking shed this weight so I could fly, you know? I've been running with a 30-pound backpack my whole life. I want to shed that backpack.
Yeah. You know, that's a funny question. Like, that is a really good question, because I think that is the heart of what we're trying to get to, is how do we speak the language that these people are hearing, which is, I think it's almost like it's fear or self-negation, you know, like, oh, that's not, you know, how do you speak to somebody who's been kind of saying, that's not a part of me, that's not, like, not part of my existence? I think for me, like, when I look at who comes to me, or like say I have a Facebook post and who's liking it. Today, actually, the post on, like, me writing this essay for erotic film school, tons of Asian guys liked it, but none of them commented. It was all women commenting.
Yeah.
About,
so I'm like an Asian woman. I may be the only male that commented.
Thank you, Seibo, for being a rebel. No, he's, you know, like, actually, you're right. I did totally discounted that.
No. I mean, but I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that you and I are kind of like outliers for your typical Asian male, and which is why we're speaking in front of the camera right now, to share a lot of these stories that I think a lot of people have discussed in private, but just haven't kind of vocalized in front of a larger audience that may not have grown up Asian, so doesn't know what we're talking about. And, you know, while you were giving that answer, I was really trying to think, all right, after Brandon's answer, what do I say? You know, and I really think, like, you know, what I've seen you do, what I've seen Gordon do, what I see a lot of, like, woke Asian males do is they just do a lot of shit outside of their comfort zone. Stop hanging out with just Asian men. Stop just dating Asian women. Stop going to Asian clubs. Don't just drift. Go shoot bow and arrows. Go do some camping. Just do different shit that really kind of helps you go, okay, Seibo likes this. Seibo doesn't like that. Oh, Seibo really likes this. Do more of that. Oh, Seibo really doesn't. You know, just if you don't push yourself out of your comfort zone, I think that allows you to keep lying to yourself. If you don't consistently put yourself out of that comfort zone and find out, like, oh, I like doing new things because I like feeling like I don't know everything about this subject right now, and it gets me off learning new things. Once I figured that part about myself, then I stopped being scared about new experiences. You know, and it took a lot of me doing new things before I could get over that, because I am a confident person when it comes to things that I know about, but I'm not super confident when I just step into a brand new situation. But what I realized was I love that initial learning process, because almost everything is new. Whereas right now, I know so much about cannabis that pretty much everything anyone tells me just affirms something else that I've read. You know, while it is still very exciting for me to learn about cannabis, you know, I don't want to say been there, done that, but I think that's why when I step into new things, it's super exciting because I know there's a really large amount of knowledge that I still haven't tapped into that I'll be able to absorb easily.
I'm glad you said that, because I mean, once we dive down and commit to something, there is a side to that rewards you monetarily, right? In society, for being an expert at something, supposedly, I mean, you've invested your time and energy to learn something. So that's, you know, there's something to be said about sticking with something.
Right.
Right? You know, because you stuck with it. But those things that, like, the passion of something, I think who someone was talking about, it means to actually suffer. Like, what are you willing to suffer through? What process? It's not the, I'm passionate about something. It's like, no, are you willing to stick with this girl that you've been dating that makes you quite unsettled in many ways? Because that's how it really is. It's this mostly unsettling feeling. When going back to learning from the horse archery master, Kasai Lehosh, he talks about how he trains his horses.
Okay.
Because they get freaked out very easily.
Okay.
And he said that instead of shooting a bow, he would take them all around to desensitize them, so that shooting a bow would be nothing.
Okay.
So say you want to get better at, like, you know, camping, or say you want to explore a different aspect of martial arts, and you're like, shit, I don't really know. Desensitizing yourself to all of that shock is one way to get you ready to take on that bigger shock that you are like, all right, it's now go time to step it up. And the other thing, too, is somebody had told me that confidence is just the memory of small wins.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
It's not having complete faith in yourself. It's just having a couple of wins under your belt.
Right, and knowing that you can repeat that process.
Exactly.
You know what's super interesting is Brandon brought up kind of like the definition of passion, or having passion for something. And you're totally right, you know, like, and I see it all the time. You know, when things are going good, it's super easy for someone to be passionate about something. But, you know, let's just take business, for example. But as soon as you start having a few shaky quarters, or you're losing money, it's like, how much do you want to stick with this? Or even on a simpler scale, it's, I thought I loved jiu-jitsu, you know, but what I really loved is, you know, winning like 75% of like my practices in jiu-jitsu. You know, and I realized, you know, there was a point where I was traveling a lot and just getting into class like maybe once a week or once every other week, and I noticed like everybody else was either catching up to me or surpassing me. And, you know, I stopped wanting to go to class as often. You know, but it was just weird because my wife was like, you only like doing this because you're winning? You know, well, what about the other people that still go to class when you're choking them out? And I'm like, you're right. You know, I easily went from someone that liked the challenge to someone that just enjoyed the dominating aspect, and I found out I am passionate about it because I kept going back and getting my ass kicked till I was, you know, kind of on par with everybody else again. But that was just a really interesting point that you brought up, because I think a lot of people will think like, am I passionate about something? Okay, does it really get me excited when I think about it? And that's kind of like their definition, whether or not they're passionate about it. But, you know, I think the true definition is, would you still do this thing if all these obstacles were in the way? You know, would you still go to jiu-jitsu if you had to commute 60 minutes each way? You know, like those would be things that, you know, really kind of questions that you should ask yourself if you want to know if you're just excited about something or have true passion for it.
That's so funny. You're lucky to have Yan who asks those questions, because it's I have, you know, guy friends now, but that's also part of a good romantic partnership, is they will have seen into you and they can ask you those hard questions and they have that safe space. All right, it's been a while for me having somebody add those questions, and I think the question should not be, does it excite you? Does it terrify you a bit? And why does it terrify you? Because my friend Jean Blomo from Genuine Strength, she and I had breakfast the other day, and we were talking about why change is so hard. And she's answering, she's like, well, there's a difference between uncomfortable and unsafe. And we can mistake unsafe or feeling uncomfortable for feeling unsafe in a situation. Like, where it's just, there is a real danger. But there are very few situations in modern society that are actually dangerous.
Right.
Right? Yeah, but we mistake feeling uncomfortable for unsafe. Like, oh, that's just, I don't go there, you know? But really the growth is in that uncomfortable place. And I think safety comes now, and I'm starting to understand, around people who are like, hey, dude, you really should go challenge yourself. Instead of, like, and it's hard to say goodbye to friends who, or spend less time with people who are like, you know, why would you do that? Because that's the wrong question your friends should be asking.
Yeah.
You should be like, dude, how are you getting there? What do you need from me? How can I help you?
Right. Just like Gordon going to Seattle.
Get the fuck out to Seattle. And he did. And he's crushing it.
He's crushing it. And, you know, I mean, this is really interesting because I think that pushing out of the comfort zone and having friends that are willing to help you do that, you know, those are really important relationships to have in your life, because you don't, I mean, there's a part of me that, like, now that I have met you and Tony's, like, oh shit, I wish Gordon was here so that we could all be together doing this. But I also know that what Gordon's learning right now, you know, like, we could all get together and talk later. What Gordon's learning right now will change him in a way that none of us could change him. You know, he's going to see some things, experience some things, and level up from it. And I think too many times, like, when you see a friend, like, I don't want to say, like, rising above, like, the rest of you, and you kind of want to purposely keep him from that. But I do think there's a little bit of that goes on, which is, you know, I want you to change, but not change too much where you're not part of this group anymore.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not articulating myself very well, but...
You are. Every culture or group has a set of spoken and unspoken rules. Some of the groups that I've traveled in my past years, God bless their souls, one of the rules is to withhold your potential.
Withhold your potential?
And not actually step into your potential. Like, you know, it's okay to just be the slacker dude.
And what group was this?
College, when I decided...
Okay, got it.
You know, like, I went to junior college first, and if anyone has been to junior college, there's a strong gravity of people who don't want to fucking be there, but they're just trying to stay on their parents' health insurance. And there's the people who are trying to get out because they don't have the financial means to actually go to a 4-year university quite yet.
Yeah.
But, like, there's the people who kind of hit their prime in high school, and they're just kind of like, you know, I was head shit, and, like, and sadly, I'm 32, and there's still people who, I've been to parties, like, in the past year or so, where I'm like, shit, I ran into someone from my high school, and they're like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm fucking Brandon. I'm like the dude that you used to be a dick to. And they're just like, shit, I'm not going to be a dick to you now. I'm like, that's what's up. I don't really say that. I'm just kind of like, I smile. I'm like, because you stayed with the same goddamn people, talked about the same things, talked about the same fucking girls that you are. I'm not faulting that. It's just there is a gravity that we have to understand every group has.
Yeah.
And being self-honest about that, I've been there. I'm like, withheld my potential. I almost didn't go to university.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I went to community college as well for a year after I had too much fun at San Diego State and flunked out.
Oh shit, San Diego, that's a fucking...
Yeah, so...
That's a school.
So that led to me going to UCLA, but I do remember at CSM, one of the things that I always hear, you know, I call these people as people that always lived in the past or the future. They would always go, yeah, remember in high school or remember when we did that, or just wait, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I'm going to be doing this, you know, and it was never like, what am I doing now to make this future, like, even plausible, you know, and it was almost like you said, you know, it's like, if your goal is to not knock it out of the park, then it's pretty easy to hit that trajectory of the career slacker, and that goes back to like the mind games people play on themselves. So like Gordon had the mind game of, I need to have a awesome 9-to-5 job that's super safe and secure, so
that will make me happy.
Yeah, so I can make my parents happy and have a family. And then there was the inverse of that on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is people that were just like, I don't want to work as hard as these next people, so my goal will be just to have the easiest life possible and figure out a way to justify that to myself as the life that I really want to live.
I mean, and so when we talk about repression, I think one of the things that we also repress is our innate gifts and talents sometimes. I never understood what it was verbally, or how to verbalize my talent, which has always been to give people space to be them. And what I mean by that is, if you want to be goofy, I set the precedence. You can be goofy, or you can be serious. You can be deep. You can be whatever the fuck you want to be. I don't set the tone that you need to be a certain way with me. But the ironic part is, I set the tone that you have to be honest. So I definitely polarize a lot of people in that way, and I kind of thought, I was like, what am I doing wrong in these relationships? But I took it personally, instead of thinking, this person just got a clear idea of what they did or did not want from me.
Right.
Like they stepped away and now they don't vibrate with me. But the people who want to do things like express themselves, or even like the dark parts, because I'm coming into my own about the things I'm repressing,
Yep.
or have repressed. And I want to be more open, because that conversation is how everything starts.
Yeah, and we're coming up on the last 10 minutes here, so I always want to be cognizant of the hour-long
Thank you for
limit that we try to do.
Yeah, thank you for keeping that.
One of the things that I wanted to express is like, by no means are Brandon and I experts in this area. We're kind of learning as we're going too, but I think we both feel that sharing these stories is helpful to others. It's helpful to ourselves, and kind of peeling back the layers of stories that we've told ourselves throughout my 40 years of living, your 32 years of living. And it's a pretty deep, complex web that people could weave for themselves. And, I think the kind of, there's a few kind of consistent themes that seem to be a part of each of the things that we talk about. And I think this like really brutal, objective honesty, at the end of the day, is something that is the catalyst for a lot of these changes, because if you can't ever get to that point of being brutally honest with yourself, then all the suggestions, all the work that you do may or may not help that cause. And I think that brings me back to like why I thought it was so important to just do a bunch of different things. Go live in a different area. Go horseback archery. Go figure out how to direct porn. These are, as ridiculous as, not ridiculous, but it's just,
it's gonna be so fun.
How different all these experiences are. It's still part of like the human experience. So the more we could put ourselves in these things, the better. The story I always tell is, and I may have told you, was, there was like this rap contest in Taiwan when I was there, and I've never rapped in my life, but I noticed everyone was rapping in broken English, so I took that as an opportunity to enter this rap contest.
Fuck yeah, dude.
And the net of the story, and we could get into this on another podcast, is I ended up signing a record deal out of this. We have 8 singles that never went anywhere, but it gave me like, a little bit of insight into what the music industry was like. I went into a recording studio. I rapped in Mandarin and English, which is what they gave me. And, now I know I never want to be a musician, but at least I have the experience of it. And I think that's one of the things that I always encourage people is just step out of your comfort zone. Even if I lost, whatever, it would have still been fun just to get up there and rap. But since I did win, it was...
Dude, that track is going on in one of my movies, man. It's gotta be on there. It just, for those who are watching this is gonna go on one of them.
A few people have seen me tell this story on various interviews, man. And no one has been able to find these. So I challenge anyone to find these hidden tracks Seibo Shen that are out there in Taiwan somewhere. I have them on my localized computer, which I may show you one day if I ever get comfortable enough. But that is kind of a weird part of my life where I was like, man, I really was a complete fraud, you know, but because I could speak English. And this is, oh shit, I think this is a good way to end it. This is how much, like, Caucasian males are valued over Asians, is even in Asia, just the fact that I could speak English allowed me to become part of this group. You know, this group of one other rapper and one female singer. We were kind of like an Asian Black Eyed Peas, for lack of a better word. And my selling point was that they might think I'm American, like an American-born Chinese. And that was enough to make, like, my character in that group stand out, you know, which is some really fucked up shit if you think about it. Yes. You know, even in our own country, we are not the most prized male. And that has to play some sort of psychological fucking...
Even Korean male pop stars, I gotta hand it to them, though. They dress really sharp and they dance really well.
Dude, they're pretty sexy, the Korean pop stars.
Say
Wait, we talking about sexy. The men or the women?
The men.
The men almost look like women, too. That's kind of like a weird part.
Yeah. Shit, Seibo, you got fucking... Okay, we got secrets, man. That's great.
Well, yeah, that one is... I've said it a few times now, so I've become a bit more comfortable talking about it. But let's just say, if there was anybody else that was like a rapper, you know, I would never say, like, I rapped in front of them, because I wouldn't want them to ask me to rap. It was just... I mean, the truth of the matter is, if English is your second language, any one of us could have won that rapping competition.
I'm just gonna sing Biggie Smalls. That's all I'm gonna do.
No, I did a Jay-Z verse.
Nice.
So it was Can I Get a What one of the verses between Ja Rule and the girl. I knew that verse, so I just said that verse verbatim. They were like, "This guy's good."
Yes.
He can speak and say these words without improper enunciation. You know,
zero hesitation.
Yeah. So, okay, I always like to end these with some sort of, well, we tried to do something actionable last time. And
oh, yeah, actionable, yeah.
So, what do we want to do this time? Is there anything that comes to mind?
If you can't say this to anybody else, write one line in your own piece of paper or journal, something that you have lied to yourself about regarding your own career. Just like your own aspirations for doing something in society. What have you lied to yourself about? And you don't have to show it to anybody. Just write it down.
I like that suggestion. You had asked me to think of something that I was shameful about a couple of weeks ago, and I almost think this is a little bit in line with that. But my suggestion is, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but try to do something completely new, not this year, but we're February 27th. Okay, by like March 14th. In the next 2 weeks, do something new. Sign up for a new painting class. Go learn how to scale fish, or you know, just do something that is not very Asian-like. You know, so don't go car drifting, or you know, don't go take pictures of food or eat ramen. You know, those are all things that Asians are awesome at doing. You know,
open mic.
Yes, open mic. You know what?
Mic.
Open mic is something I'd like to do one day. Push myself.
We'll talk about that after that.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Seibo's here.
Brandon's here.
Thanks for watching, and tune in next week. All right.